Hello, and welcome to Loom the History. Today, we will be looking at Spanish Reconquista, the myth, the origin, and the medieval reality. When people hear about the word Reconquista, they often imagine a single century long Christian campaign to reclaim Spain from Muslim rule. But historians are clear about one thing that Conquista wasn't a single war. It wasn't a unified plan, and not even a term that was used by medieval people themselves. Instead, Reconquista is a later historical label applied retrospectively to a long and uneven medieval process involving frontier warfare, shifting alliances, political fragmentation, and gradual territorial expansion. To understand how the Reconquista began, we must not start with the conquest, but we must start with the collapse of the Visigothic Empire. The Visigoths were a powerful Germanic people, originally part of larger Gothic group who became significant players in the late Roman Empire. They famously sacked Rome in 410 AD under Alaric I, later establishing the kingdom in Gaul and Hispania. Fast forward in the year 711, the political landscape of Iberian Peninsula changed dramatically. The Visigoths emerged from a larger Gothic group, such as Travorini, who migrated from Eastern Europe, possibly fleeing the Huns, and entered the Roman Empire in the late 4th century. After being mistreated by the Roman authorities, they revolted, defeating Rome and its forces at the Battle of Adrianople in 378 AD, and later sacking Rome in 410 AD. They established a kingdom centered in Toulouse and a kingdom in Hispania. And after being pressured by the Franks, they expanded into the Iberian Peninsula, creating the Visigothic Empire or Visigothic Kingdom of Toledo, which dominated Spain and Portugal for centuries. The Visigothic code unified Roman and Visigothic law and influenced later Spanish legal traditions that granted women significant number of rights. Many Catholic churches from this period are still standing if it comes to the infrastructure. When we talk about the foundation of Spain, in retrospect, it can be said that Visigoths bridged Roman and medieval Iberia and are considered foundational and integral to Spanish identity. By 711, the Visigothic kingdom was already collapsing internally. After the death of King Witiza in 710, the kingdom was crippled by a succession crisis, bitter nobles fighting each other, and weak and divided leadership. Key causes for civil war and collapse of Visigothic Empire were first the contested successions. The Visigothic monarchy struggled between the elected and the hereditary kingship. Witiza's sons were bypassed, and Roderick seized the throne in Toledo with noble support. Roderick was widely unpopular, and nobles prioritized self interest over defenses of the Visigothic Empire. The second was divided kingdom, because Witiza's supporters rejected Roderick and Aquila II claimed rule in the northeastern Iberian Peninsula. This splitted the realm until his death at the age of 35. Now, not much is known about his leadership style or other aspects of his reign. And the third factor was the betrayal factor. Disaffected factions, especially Witiza's supporters, sought Muslim help to remove Roderick, and a deal was brokered by Count Julian, the governor of Ceuta, a Spanish town in northern Africa. And the fourth was the social and religious unrest. This was the result of internal resentment, including the persecutions of Jewish communities that weakened central authorities and caused a nearly failed state. And while all of this was happening, the Muslim intervention was right at the gate. It was when Tariq ibn Said crossed the Strait of Gibraltar in 711. He encountered a kingdom that was already fighting itself. Now, Tariq acted under the orders from Musa ibn Nusayr, Umayyad governor of North Africa, with the objective of broader expansion. There was significant support from some local factions, including Jewish communities, which were oppressed under current Visigothic rule. Roderick was caught off guard while campaigning in the north against Basic and Aquila's supporters. All of this resulted in a very ill prepared Battle of Gordelete. At the Battle of Gordelete, often identified as Wadi Laku, Tariq's forces defeated Roderick, the last Visigothic king. While there are no accurate historical accounts to verify without contradiction, it is widely believed that, conservatively speaking, Visigoths lost around 30,000 men, including Roderick himself, while Umayyads lost about 12,000 men. But that number can be as high as 35,000 for Visigoths and 19,000 for Umayyads. This defeat triggered the rapid collapse of Visigothic authorities, followed by the disintegration of political institutions, followed by the swift Muslim takeover and control of the most of the Iberian Peninsula. Now, scholars emphasize that this was not merely a military defeat but a political implosion, enabling Muslim rule to spread with remarkable speed. While most of the Iberian Peninsula came under Muslim control, not all regions were subdued. In the mountainous north, especially Asturias, small Christian communities survived mainly because these regions were difficult to access and the terrain created natural defensible positions, and it was poorly suited for a large occupying force. Later traditions associate early resistance with Pelayo, a Visigothic nobleman. In 718, Pelayo founded the kingdom of Asturias. He is credited with initiating the Reconquista and establishing the Asturian monarchy. According to later chronicles, Pelayo led a confrontation at Covadonga, dated between 718 and 722. There is a scholarly caution, however, because modern historians stress that the Battle of Covadonga is semi legendary, since its exact date, scale, and nature are uncertain. What matters historically is not the battle, but the fact that a Christian polity survived and political continuity in the region was preserved after 711. This survival was later interpreted as a symbolic beginning of Reconquista, but that interpretation emerged centuries later. In 756, Muslim Iberia entered a political phase. Abd al-Rahman I, a surviving Umayyad prince, fled Abbasid persecutions and defeated tribal Muslims in Andalusia. In 756 AD, he established the independent state of Cordoba. Cordoba became the political center of Andalusia. This initiated nearly 3 centuries of Umayyad rule in the region. For the next 250 years or so, the trade, the culture, the architectural projects, and the regulations flourished. The Caliphate of Cordoba, established in 929 AD, Abd al-Rahman III proclaimed himself as Caliph, transforming the Emirates into the Caliphate of Cordoba. During his reign until 961, Rahman III challenged Abbasid Baghdad and Fatimid authority in Raqqada in Tunisia. This marked the peak of Umayyad power in Iberia. This also saw Cordoba, including Medina al-Zahra, as its capital. This marked the height of centralized Muslim authority in Iberia. The front was a different story. During this long period, there was no unified Christian offense. The peninsula was shaped by border warfare, raiding and counter raiding, cross religious alliances, and gradual territorial changes. Now, historians caution that calling this era a reconquista imposes a later narrative on a complex medieval reality. A major turning point came in 1031 and things changed because the Caliphate of Cordoba collapsed. The Caliphate disintegrated due to multiple reasons, one of which being the Fatina of Andalus had a 20-year-old civil war. It was caused by failed puppet caliphs and assassinations of competent ones. The power struggle between Arabs and Berber Muwalads in the region after the death of Al Mansur, who was the last chancellor, and the military commander of Umayyad Caliphate in 1002. This resulted in ethnic and factional rivalries that resulted in weakening of the central leadership. External Christian pressure was also acting as an added fuel to already burning region. The caliphate was ultimately destroyed from within. What followed was the capture of Toledo. The fragmentation had already altered the balance of power. In 1085, Alfonso VII captured Toledo. This was strategically crucial. It was also symbolically powerful because this was the former Visigothic center of power. Its capture became one of the most clear medieval examples of what historians labeled later on as Reconquista. A decisive moment occurred on 16 July 1212 as Las Navas de Tolosa. Caliph Muhammad al-Nasir invaded Christian Iberia to regain control of Navas de Tolosa. This was also in part response and revenge against Christian defeat in Alacross in 1195. Pope Innocent III had declared a crusade. Christian rulers sought to destroy Almohad's power and were aided by crusading Templars, Hospitallers, Santiago, along with French knights and other Iberian forces. While the Crusaders did surround Las Navas, most of them withdrew before the midpoint of the battle due to unbearable heat and lack of resources. However, this was significant because this battle permanently weakened Almohad's influence. Contemporary and later accounts, especially by Rodrigo Jimenez de Rada, famed it as a moment of religious and political transformation. Rodrigo Jimenez de Rada was an Archbishop of Toledo. He was also a statesman, historian, and a military leader. He was also the author of De Rebus Hispania. Christian expansion accelerated after 1212. Though resistance continued, the final phase unfolded between 1482 and 1492. Isabella I of Castile and Ferdinand II of Aragon, the Catholic monarchs, waged war against the Emirate of Granada, the last Muslim polity in Iberia. After a 10-year-long war of attrition that began in 1481, through small battles, economic tensions between Moors that escalated during the 10 years that resulted in economic distress, after multiple sieges and the pressure of supply disruption and cannon attacks on fortified city walls that were previously considered impenetrable, was far too much. Under all this pressure, the city was slowly creeping towards the threat of a civil war that exploited the internal conflicts in the court of Granada that played a significant role in its fall. And on January 2nd, 1492, Granada finally surrendered. This is conventionally marked as the end of Muslim political rule in Iberia, the closing point of what historians later called Reconquista. To summarize, it is safe to say that Reconquista did not begin as a planned Christian campaign. It emerged from the collapse of Visigothic Empire in 711. It persisted through regional survival, fragmentation, and shifting frontiers. It concluded in 1492, nearly after 8 centuries. What later generations remembered as a unified religious struggle was a complex medieval process shaped by power, geography, and historical memory. Thanks for watching.